Good evening, everyone. My name is Takiwa Smith, founder and executive director of Science, Engineering, and Mathematics Link Incorporated, also known as SCM Link, and I want to welcome you to tonight's Teen Science Cafe. The Teen Science Cafe is a program of our Math and Science Career Academy, whose goal is to expose teens to various STEM career pathway at a critical time where they're making decisions about their post secondary education and career options. It gives them opportunity to not only learn about a particular STEM discipline, but get a chance to learn the journey of a STEM professional and the work that they do every day and how they got to pursue the career that they're in now. This cafe is very special and near dear to me because it's one of my favorite times of the year as a chemical engineer. It is National Engineers Week, the celebration of bringing the awareness of engineering and all the contributions that engineering has brought to our society, highlighting different engineering career pathways. And so I am super excited about tonight's cafe and that our speaker is a engineer and also that she is a woman engineer. A few years ago, there was this hashtag that I use from time to time when I remember when it was saying STEM is women's work. And when it comes to a lot of STEM disciplines, and engineering is one of them, people don't think automatically that they're women engineers, but there are so many women engineers making great contributions in their fields, in their companies. So if you are a teenage girl that is curious about engineering, that is wondering if it is for you, we are telling you right now, STEM is women's work, and it is possible for you to become an engineer when you grow up. So keep believing in yourself, knowing that you can be an engineer, and we have an example of a woman engineer here. So without further ado, I am going to turn the cafe over to Colin Pounders, our program coordinator, who's going to introduce this evening's speaker.
Hi everyone, Carlin Pounders here, and I am excited to introduce our tonight's speaker, who is Ninti Chance, who codes for Google Cloud Storage, helping Google users to transfer files into the cloud. Her path to Google is non-traditional as she studied theater in college. When she's not at Google, she loves making cosplay TikTok videos with makeup and costumes. She keeps active by doing aerial silk circus classes, and she just moved from Atlanta, Georgia to Seattle, Washington. Google has opened so many possibilities for her, so we're looking forward to hearing from Ninti tonight. And without further ado, I will hand it over to her.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ninti Chance, and I am so excited to be here as a woman, as a Black woman, as an engineer, and I'm excited to go over an introduction to coding for all of you, either as a career or a hobby. And so I would love to see interaction in the chat so I can get to know you just as much as you'll get to know me and coding today. So let's get started. Like I said, this is an introduction to coding. So, who am I? What do? I code for Google currently, and my mission is to empower kids and teens of color to dream big. I used to live in Atlanta about 3 weeks ago, but I currently live in Seattle because I moved here for work, and I am loving living in a new city. When I'm not at work, like Carlin has said, I am an amateur aerialist and a voice actor, and I like to create content on TikTok. My favorite things are cartoons and anime, and also listening to music. And before I started at Google, I actually grew up as the youngest of 7 in a single parent household. And things like working at Google or pursuing any sort of dreams seemed so far away from me when I was a child. But I was afforded a lot of opportunities to go to good schools. I got a scholarship for a college preparatory school, and I went to after school programs in theater. And I feel like that actually allowed my world to change and for my trajectory to skyrocket. I went to a private college in Macon, Georgia. That's where I grew up, Mercer University. And after I graduated from college, I went into retail. So I was working for basically minimum wage for my first few years of adulthood. And I wasn't making a lot of money and I was struggling financially, but I always had the support of my family. I moved into working as a brand ambassador, which is like experiential marketing. If you've ever seen people giving out free samples at football games, those people were probably me. We were just representing brands, and I loved doing that. But I really missed academics. And so I went to a coding boot camp where I learned how to code. And after my boot camp, I got my first job at Home Depot as a web developer, and I was working in JavaScript and Ruby on Rails. And then I met a recruiter for Google through LinkedIn, and I studied really hard for the Google interview. And I believe that a lot more Black women and a lot more people of color can really be introduced to Google. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I believe that it's accessible to people if they have the means or the people who can contact or let them get contact to Google. And now I work for Google, and I absolutely love working here. And I believe that any of you who want to be engineers in the future can work for Google too. So what do I do at Google? Like I said, I am a software engineer, so I code during the day. I also do a lot of other things outside of coding. I work on the team that I work on moves users' file system data into the Google Cloud storage. And outside of that team, I volunteer to teach teens and adults about code. I like to speak on panels about mental health, being Black, how to interview at Google, and more. I also write design documents at work before I actually come up with a solution or before I implement a solution. I review other people's code and I implement code. I like to host team lunches for my team. So we play board games and we share pictures of our lives, and it's really fun. And also, I help candidates of color prepare for the Google interview. That's something I'm very passionate about, is increasing the representation at Google. So please tell me, who are you? And if you don't feel comfortable writing it in the chat, just think about who you are. Think about who you want to be and really get in that space. So what is your name? What characters from TV or books or games or movies do you relate to the most, and why? And what is your dream? I'm just monitoring the chat here. Let's see. Hopefully we get some people engaging as we go along. But for now, it's okay to just think about these things. I think it's really important to write down your dreams or to write down who you are so you can always remember who you are, because that's a very powerful thing. Sometimes in your life, you forget who you are, but when you get back connected to it, it just makes you even more powerful as a person and even more able to achieve any of your goals and dreams. So let's move forward. So our goals today is to learn coding terms, to use documentation to understand coding libraries, to use code to make a picture, and to get encouraged to pursue our dreams. I am so encouraged all the time to keep going after all of my dreams. One of them was to work at Google, And I have more dreams, and I'm still working towards them every single day. It doesn't matter what age you are. You can continue having dreams until like you're 150 or however old people live to. So the terminology we're going to be going over today is variables, functions, parameters and arguments, function call, JavaScript, code along, and strings. So let's dive in to the first language I ever learned, and the language that I feel very comfortable with, even though at my current job, I code in a language called Golang. So what is JavaScript? Computers speak languages just like humans do, but computers communicate in ones and zeros, aka binary, like this binary example I put on the slide, 10101, and I think that represents the number 21. Humans can't read binary, so we created coding languages that can get translated into binary so that computers can understand us. And JavaScript is one of the many languages that humans use to communicate with our browsers. We can basically tell a browser what color to be, where to put a button, and so many more things by using JavaScript to communicate with it. And anytime during this presentation, if I'm going quickly or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. I know Carlin is going to be handling the chat, so let's move forward. Now that we know what JavaScript is, let's figure out what a function is. So what is a function? If you see on the screen, we actually have a function, say my name, and the variable greeting, hello plus name, and it returns a greeting. So let's check out that function. Let me just go into the browser. So this is the function, say my name, and I am calling the function, and we'll go over function calls in a moment, but let's see what happens when we press play or when we run our code. If you see in the console to our right, it is saying, hello, Ninti, hello, Destiny's Child, hello, whatever name we've passed that function. So let's get back to our presentation. Functions are made up of a lot of different things. There is the function definition or declaration. There's also the name of the function, say my name. There are arguments. Arguments are what you pass into the function. There's a function body. It's everything that is from this bracket here until this ending bracket here is the function body. And then there's a return value, which is what the function returns. So what is a function? A function is a chunk of code that you can use over and over again. It basically performs a simple task that it's programmed to do. So when a function's name is called, it does something. It does what's in its body. So whenever you call, say my name, it will do whatever is in here, which is return greeting. Sometimes functions are given arguments to do something with, and sometimes functions return values. So just like you, a function has a name, it can do things, it can receive things, and it can give things. Functions are extremely active. What is a variable and what is a string? If you look here in our function example, we have a variable here called greeting, and we have a string here that says hello. So a variable essentially stores information. Let's think of a variable like a box. It can store a lot of things. It can store integers or numbers. It can store strings. It can store a lot of other data structures. And a string is any string of characters between quotes. So if we look at our example here, these letters, hello, are in between these quotes. And that's what a string is. A variable, greeting, can store it. So greeting is storing hello plus name. What is a function call? So when a program calls a function, it is telling it to execute the code within its body. And if we go back, remember what the body was. The body is anything inside of these two brackets. So it's telling it to perform whatever is in this body. Give me one moment. So when a program calls a function, it is telling it to execute the code within its body. Kind of like when your parents call your name after telling you to do the dishes. When you're called, you go do the dishes. Well, I mean, most of the time, or maybe some of the time. But when a function is called, it does what the program tells it to do. So if you see here, this line is calling the function. And the way that you can tell that it's calling the function is it has the name of the function followed by some parentheses, and then a parameter or an argument, as you saw earlier, is passed into the function. So this function call will return a string that says, hello, Ninti. Let's take a look at that again. Right here, it's calling the function, and it says, hello, Ninti. So let's take a moment to explore P5.js. P5.js is essentially a library of JavaScript. We're going to go over JavaScript libraries after we explore P5.js together. So there's a lot of different code that people have already written. I want to check out star. So the star function created for this example is capable of drawing a wide range of different forms. And we can place the numbers into the star function, and it calls within draw to explore. So let's try to run this. It looks like it's already running, and we have these stars on the page, and they're turning around. But there's also other examples here. Let's see. We've got snowflakes. And it looks like the code is telling our browser to show this, I guess, grid here. And inside of the grid, it is snowing. And all of this was done with this code that is shown beneath here. And that's really cool because today we're going to do something similar. We're going to use code to draw a picture. I want to check out maybe one more of these examples. Ooh, this one's really pretty. It's very geometric. And here's the code for it. So I will link everything in the chat, and I will also link it to the organizers so that anyone watching will be able to follow along and also be able to see the examples themselves. Let's get back to the presentation. So we just found out what P5.js is. Essentially, you're taking JavaScript, the coding language, and you are making art with it. And that's really cool, the amount of things you can do with coding. You can make visual art. You can also make music. There is a concept called live coding where you use code to create music, and that is so cool. And today we'll be drawing. So we're going to use this link here. It is a playground for drawing in JavaScript or in P5.js. And I'm also going to link this. There you go. And what we will be drawing today is a little girl with afro puffs. And we're going to be coding that together in a code along. That was one of the words that we were going to discuss today. A code along is essentially where one person is coding and then everyone else in the class will be coding along, like on their computers. And luckily, P5.js already has its own web editor. So if you go to editor.p5js.org, then you can follow along too and be able to code. I will be pasting everything into the chat. And like I said, I will be giving the organizers all of the answers so that you can make this picture as well. So before we get into drawing, it's always great to read the documentation. And what is documentation? Well, coding languages and libraries often come with documentation, and it's kind of like instructions on how to use that code. And it's so great because everything is accessible on the internet. So anyone, anywhere can learn to code as long as you have internet access. These libraries, like I said, have documentation like an instruction manual. And let's read the P5.js docs together. That should be right here. So we want to draw that little girl that I put over here, and she has a circle face and circle puffballs and an arc for her eyes and an arc for her nose and a rectangle for her neck. And she's all of these beautiful color shades of brown, and she has a pink background. So let's figure out how we can use this P5.js to code this. So if we look here, P5.js has all of these functions, and we talked about functions earlier. Functions can do things. So there's a function which can create an arc. There's a function which can create an ellipse, a circle, a line, a point, a rectangle, a square, a triangle, so many different functions. Let's check out the circle function together. And we are now reading the documentation, which is the instructions for any coding language library. So to draw a circle at the location 3030 with a diameter of 20, we will call the function circle, and we will pass in these parameters, 30, 30, 20. But what do these parameters represent and mean? Of course, most documentation gives you a nice description. That's if the documentation is written well, and the P5.js documentation is very good. So this circle takes in the parameters x, y, and d. X represents the x coordinate of the circle, the center of the circle. So if you go look back to your math days and you remember how you used to make graphs, I think maybe late elementary school to middle school, and even in high school, you're still making graphs. A graph has an x and a y coordinate, and the x coordinate is what's horizontal and the y coordinate is what's vertical. So when we pass x into the circle, we're saying this is the center of the circle. This is where the center of the circle is located on our grid. And the y coordinate is also where the center of the circle is located on our grid. And then finally, the diameter of the circle. That is basically how big our circle is going to be. Let's try to do this together. And I am going to silence my phone really fast so that we're not interrupted anymore. Like I said, we're going to be making this little girl. And before we jump into making the little girl, I just want to show you this tool that we're going to be using today. So if you were deciding to make your own project on P5JS, you can use this Google Color Picker, and it gives you the RGB values and the hexadecimal values or any other values on how to find a color. So if you want to use blue, it will give you 52, 76, 235. And this is what represents blue for the computer. So the first thing that we're going to do in our code is we're going to create variables. And if you remember what a variable is from earlier, a variable is basically a box. It just holds a value. It stores a value. So we're going to store 0 in the variable black. And in the variable brown, we're going to store 79, 39, and 6. In the variable brown skin, we're going to store 117, 60, and 13. So let's grab the variable for pink, which is 196, 24, and 93, and look up that color in the color picker. Let's see here. Look at that. It gave us a pink. So in our variables, we are storing all of the RGB values for our colors. And that is so exciting. I don't know about you, but this makes me really excited. This is one of the first things I did when I started coding, was just creating art in the browser in HTML and CSS, which are also coding languages. And it was just something that was really fun for me to do. So if you see here in P5JS, we have the editor, which is where you can code, and then you can see the results of your code to the right. So right now it just has a blank background. It's gray. I want us to go ahead and paste in our variables. But before we do that, I think that the instructions should tell us to create a function. So earlier we talked about declaring functions. That's just giving a function a name before we actually give it any actions to do. So I will be writing that in the chat, that we are going to write function create girl. We're giving that function a name, and please paste that into your P5JS editor. Right now, it looks like we're getting an error. It says it's missing a semicolon. We're not going to get into semicolons right now. I don't think that JavaScript needs semicolon. It is literally just like decoration. But y'all, we're not going to have this discussion in the class. And let's see what other error we might have. If I press play, it says that we have an unexpected token. Oh yeah, because I didn't call my function. There you go. I'm just calling it, and I told y'all to write this out. So function create girl. And if we press play, do we have an error still? We do. And there you go. Our code is working, even though it's not doing anything yet, because we haven't told our function to do anything. We haven't given it a body. So we're going to go back to our instructions and figure out how are we going to get the function's body. Well, the first thing is to declare our variables. And I'm going to put that in the function's body. And I'm going to have to add semicolons to everything. That should just be a warning. Okay, I don't have to add semicolons. That's good. But if you really want, if you've coded before and you prefer to add semicolons, you go ahead and live your semicolon dreams. Okay. Next up, we want to add a face. Let's do that. I am adding the face to the chat if you're following along. And I will show you where to put that. We are going to put it in the body of the function. And I'm going to make this a little bit easier for us by dragging this out here. That way I can swap between screens a little bit easier. There you go. So right underneath our variables, we're going to add to the body of our function the face. Okay, so this is the moment of reveal. Will the face show up? Well, let's press play over here, and this is going to run our code. It looks like we have another error. Let's see. Reference error, stroke is not defined. That is interesting. P5.js should have the function stroke, but for now, let's see if the rest of fill is also not defined. Okay, I'm gonna take this to another editor. Just give me one moment. There's always these bugs or unexpected things happening when you are coding. It is a part of the life of a coder. And I could debug it, but for the sake of our program today, we're just going to use another editor. And this editor should work. It's taking a moment to load. Create code. Let's give my computer a moment to load. And I am going to make our canvas a little bit larger and also change the color of the canvas to a pink. We go back to the color picker. I'm going to show you that pink. So I want our background to look like that. Let's pass in these parameters into background. And it still looks like I have an extra bracket somewhere that is causing this to error out. So if you see down here, it says syntax error, unexpected token, script.js. So this is this file on line 25. If we look at 25, it's saying that I have an extra colon. Oh, I see it. Okay. If you look on line 19, it looks like I accidentally copied in an extra colon. So we just debugged in live time. So if you look, this extra colon was not allowing us to see our code running because our program basically stopped where that colon was, and there's an extra colon, and it reported that error to us down here. And so I'm going to remove that colon, and hopefully that'll show us a beautiful pink brown background and a brown face. Aha. Okay, cool. This happens all the time when I'm coding. And I'm sure it happens for a lot of developers. It's a part of the process. So let's see what's next. We added the face. So let's add the ears. I will post this code in our chat. For adding the ears, and I will show you exactly where we add it. So back to the body of the function called createGirl, we're going to paste in the code for ears. And if you see, now we have these two circles, and they're kind of in the front. And let's talk about how we got these colors here. So you remember the P5.js documentation we were reading? We were able to see how to make different types of shapes. If we go back to that documentation, let's see, it's called, I'm going to grab it from down here. There are all of these functions. And if we look at stroke, what does stroke do? So stroke can give you the RGB value, which is the color. And if you see all these examples, we have this green stroke, we have this greenish translucent stroke. So if you pass in RGB, it determines the color of any of the shapes that you declare below it. So if we go back to our editor, not this one, I'm leaving that one, but here we have the brown color in that we pass to stroke for this ellipse. And the ellipse is basically a function which creates a shape that's like an oval, but if you give it the same size, it creates a circle. And this is the x-axis and the y-axis. So we're saying at x 250, which is here, and y 250, which is here, we want a brown circle by setting the stroke here. And then right below it, oh, I made an accident, guys. So the stroke is actually the line, the outline of the circle, and the fill will be the inside of the circle. So if I were to comment this out, and what that means is anytime that you add these two forward-facing slashes, the code will not run this. It will not recognize it. It will not read it. So if I were to remove that, and where else are we having some fill? Oh, but there's also more fill down here. So I'll just remove that. So if you remove the fill, it's just the line. But then if you add the function fill back, that would fill in our shape. And if you remove ellipse, we won't have any shape whatsoever. We won't have the face. We'll just have the ears because we're doing function calls, which allows our program to call that particular function. So it looks like the ears are in front of the face here. And basically, JavaScript will read from the top here to the bottom. So anything we add underneath this will be called after it. So the ears were put on top of the face because we called these ellipses after the face. So if we move this above the face, then the ears will be right behind it. If you see the darker brown ears and then the lighter brown face, now the order has switched. And I'll show that with a bit of a more clear color a bit later. So let's go back to our instructions. Let's add the neck, because, you know, a lot of people have necks, a lot of people have faces. And I am posting that code in the chat. If you need any of the code to be reposted, please let me know and I will post it in the chat. And we're going to add the neck right underneath the ears. Let's see. So it's going to go from just a face with ears and a face to a face with ears and a neck. This is starting to look more like a person. Like, that's really cool. Now let's add some eyes. So if you look here, instead of it being an ellipse, we have an arc function here that we're calling. And I'm going to post that again in the chat. If you are following along after this program, everything will be posted in the information box as well, so that you'll be able to follow along. And let's add the eyes. So the eyes are these two little arcs. And like I was saying, JavaScript's going to read from top to bottom. So what happens if I add this code right before the face? Just take a moment to answer that in your mind. Where do you think the eyes will be? That's right. The eyes are behind the face now. So we want to ensure anything that we want on top of another shape is in the code beneath it. Just like this. So just like you read a book from top to bottom, a lot of coding languages read code from top to bottom. There are some exceptions, but we're not there yet. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and we see the eyes again. Let's take a look at the documentation again and look at our rectangle and also figure out how is it possible that the rectangle has the same color as the ears, but we didn't actually say explicitly the stroke to add the color with stroke and fill. Well, like I was saying earlier, anything that is called before from top down is going to be applied to the shape beneath it. So the shadow or the darker brown color is applied to the rectangle. Let's take a look at the rectangle function in our documentation for P5.js. So a rectangle will draw, this function will draw a rectangle at the location specified at the X and Y axis with a width and a height of whatever you specify. So if you see it's 30, 20, width and height. And let's look at the rest of the documentation. Like it says, X represents the X axis of the rectangle or the X coordinate of the rectangle. Y represents the Y coordinate of the rectangle. W represents the width of the rectangle. And H represents the height of the rectangle, which is optional because some rectangles have the same width and height, and that actually creates a square. So back here, if we look at the rectangle in our code, we're passing 220, 345, 60, and 40. So I want you to ask yourself this question: what does 220 represent? What does 345 represent? What does 60 represent? And what does 40 represent? I wonder if you are keeping up. Oh, you need the eyes code? I'm going to post it. Give me one moment. There you go. So if you are saying that 220 represents where the rectangle is on the x-axis, you are correct. Let's change this to 420 and see what happens if we change where the x-axis is. We're going to run our code. As you can see, it's way over here because the x-axis is represented by this horizontal part of the grid, and y-axis is up and down. So let's change the y-axis to, I don't know, 300. And let's see where this rectangle ends up. So the rectangle went up just a little bit. because the y-axis starts at 0 and goes all the way to 500 up here, and the x-axis starts at 0 and goes all the way to 500 over here. So let's change the height or the width of the rectangle to make it really big. I'm going to make it 100. It's not really big, but it's bigger than what it is now. We're waiting for our code to complete running. Sometimes my internet slows down a bit. I'm gonna refresh, reload. And run. Our 100 wasn't added, so let's do that really fast. Okay, as you can see, now our rectangle is a little bit wider. And let's see if we can make our rectangle taller by making it 200. And now it's taller. So as you can see, we have the x coordinate, the y coordinate, the width, and the height of the rectangle that we're passing in. And that's how we're able to tell the browser what to do over here. And essentially the rectangle function is doing something. And the thing that it's doing is creating a rectangle. I'm going to fix that function to be back to what it used to be so that this person has a neck right underneath their head as opposed to all the way across the room, because most people's necks aren't all the way across the room. There you go. So looking at this little girl, let's see what else we're missing. Pupils. Let's add some pupils to this drawing. And we're going to add the pupils right underneath the eyes. And the pupils are going to be the color black. So if you see black is a variable. And I also need to make sure to put this in the chat for anyone who's following along. So black is a variable which holds a number. If we go back up, we declared it here, and that number is 0. In our RGB color picker, if we want the color black, see if this works. It's 0, 0, 0. Nice. So let's go back here. And let's take a look at this arc function and what the arc function does. Going back to the documentation, if you do decide to become a software engineer or a coder, or if you just do it for fun, documentation is like the bread and butter. It will always be there. So just like we had the rectangle function, we also have an arc function, and it creates arcs. There's different things that you can pass in to make your arc a little bit different. Like if you want to make a Pac-Man, there's parameters you can pass into the function to change it that way. But we just want our arc to be like something like this. Let's see what these parameters mean. we've got X, Y, W, H, start, stop, and then the mode, and then details. So X is the X coordinate of the arc's ellipse. Then we have the Y coordinate of the arc's ellipse. Then, and the ellipses being something like an oval or a circle, depending on the size that you pass it to. H is the height of the arc's ellipse. And then start is the angle to start the arc, specified in radians. And stop is the angle to stop the arc, specified in radians. And then mode determines the drawing of the arc. And these are the drawings. I am not going to pretend like I understand geometry because I don't. But the way that this is, we have 210 for the X coordinate, 250 for the Y coordinate. And then this is the start of the arc. We're saying we want it to start at 20. And we're saying pi, we're passing in pi, which allows our arc to be this shape upside down here instead of upside up. If we flip 0 and pi, it's going to flip our arc around. Let's take a look at that. So we flipped the pupils arc, but that's not what we want. So anytime you might be a little bit confused about what the code is doing, sometimes I get confused, you can just run the function and look at what the function is doing itself. So what if we were to just tweak this number to 100? Does it do anything? It makes our arc really wide. And that's because that's the height of our particular ellipse. So let's move on. Change this back to what it was looking like. And let's add her puffballs. This is my favorite part because I love this hairstyle. And we're going to add 2 ellipses. They're basically circles. We can also use the circle function, but we're just going to use the ellipse function today because that's how I originally coded it. And we can always go back and refactor our code. And what does refactor mean? Refactor essentially means to improve your code. You go in and you edit your code to make it, I guess, a little easier to read. We're adding the puffs. And I am adding this to the chat for those of you following along. And it will also be in the information below the video. So let's see these puffs. Okay. All right. I think she looks good. But you know what everyone needs? Everyone needs some edges. So let's add some edges for this lady. Let's do it. The edges, as you can see, is also going to be an arc. Add it right below here. That is better. Laid, snatched, whatever you want to use to describe it. Okay. I think we should add, before we add the tongue, we should add the mouth. And let me add the edges to the chat. There we go. And we're going to add the smile. See what happens on our beautiful lady. The smile. Wonderful. I think some of us might be following along in the P5JS editor. So I just want to show you the P5JS editor really quickly. There you go. This is what it should look like in that editor. And I'm going to paste everything that we've done up to now into the chat. Oh, apparently the chat doesn't take all of that information. So if you need all of this information, I'm going to paste the link to my repl. And that's the website we're using right now to write this code. And I'm going to paste that into the chat in case you need that information. Cool. What is next? The tongue. Let's make her look really happy and add the tongue and the teeth. So the tongue is an arc and it's the color pink. And the teeth is a rectangle and it's the color white. And if we go back to our variables we set, we created white and we also created pink. So we can go ahead and pass that into our stroke and fill methods or our stroke and fill functions. And those functions create the outline of our shape and then create the color within our shape. And then this rectangle method will create our teeth shape. And up here we have the tongue, which will be pink, and an arc. Yay, she looks so happy. I'm extremely happy for her. I'm happy that she's happy. We've got the nose that we want to add and the blush. So we're going to add those two together as well. So we can speed up the process, and I will, like I said, post it in chat. There we go. What does she look like now? She looks beautiful. And what is missing? She needs a shirt. Let's see here. Add the torso and the arms. She's almost done, y'all. As you can see, the torso is another arc, but this time, this arc is going to be, oh, it's also faced upside down. The other arcs, where this nose arc was faced upside up, if you see it here. And then we have some arm lines. I used rectangle to create these arm lines here. Oh, and I'm in P5JS. Let me. Make sure I pass that into the chat. See, what is she missing? Our other editor has some things that we can do as well. So let me just add everything into that editor. And the editor is where we're writing our code. There you go. And like I was saying, I use the rectangle method to create these lines. But if we were to look at our documentation for P5JS again, There's actually a method called line, and we can draw all these different types of lines if we use this function. So you don't have to use a rectangle if you don't want to. You can like try to explore. But we are actually finished with our girl. She looks great. She's got hair. She's got a smile. She's got eyes. She's got ears. She's got arms. So, do you have any questions? Are you curious about Google? Are you maybe curious about code? Are you confused about anything that we went over? Are you curious about anything? Feel free to ask away. And I know Carlin is checking out the chat. Carlin, do you know if we have any questions to answer before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I was like, I'm trying to unmute myself, but I know they can see me. So I just posted for people to put any questions that they have. You know, I did have a question as far as this was so great. Like literally, it's the edges for me. Fantastic image that we just created. And what would you say are maybe some other applications that kids can look forward to when they're coding? Like, of course, creating art and images is amazing, but perhaps are there any other like cool applications that they can look forward to? Like once they get the basics down, oh, and you continue with this, like this is what else you can do.
Yeah, there's so many things you can do with code. The applications are basically limitless at this point because we use code for everything. A lot of the things that previously were used or people would do have been able to be replaced with code. And it's not like people are being replaced. It's just that these tools that people are using to do their jobs are being added to so the people have an easier time doing their jobs. Of course, I'm sure you know about games. If you play Roblox, there's actually a lot of coding in Roblox and scripts that you can run in Roblox that I know my nephew uses. But beyond that, Google, like searching for things online, was coded by some really smart people. There's also coding like applications like YouTube. And if you really wanted to yourself, just create something like a website, a web page, or something to represent who you are, a blog, you can use coding to create that blog. I know that people use coding to, I guess, ensure that all of the computers in your house work. So computers are everywhere nowadays. My washing machine has a computer inside of it. Of course, like Alexa is a computer, or any lights that are controlled by like clapping or your voice. All of those things are controlled using code. So if you want to build robots, the software inside of a robot is code. So like there's so many different applications for code. You're just starting off. If you are today starting off, or maybe you have like more of a foundation and you know a lot about it. But there's a wide variety of fields that you can go into. There's coding like for rocket ships. There's coding for music applications. Say that you work on, I forgot, I think it's called a DAW, which is a digital audio workspace. So people who rap, they might use something like Fruity Loops or GarageBand to rap on. Well, those things are coded. For people who draw digitally, they might draw on Photoshop or Procreate, which are applications that are coded. So there are so many things that you can do in this world with code, and code is such a wide career. You can do it as a hobby, you can do it as a career, but no matter what you want to do with code, there's the possibilities are endless.
I love that. And I love how, in mentioning about they can do gaming, they can code robots. I think last year for National Engineers Week, the speaker that we had, she works with robots. So hearing you say that just reminded me. And so I guess the other question that I have for you, which is interesting, in our previous Teen Science Cafe, where we talked about aerospace engineering, I feel like this came up with that as well, which is when you are someone who loves STEM, but you might also have an interest in something more artsy, something more creative, or maybe in the other person's case, you're also into athletics. Could you give some advice for if kids are not just drawn to STEM, but also drawn to things that might seem outside of STEM?
Yeah, I think that I'm actually like a really good example of someone who is drawn to things outside of STEM. And if you really love computer science, but you also want to be able to do a lot of different things like athletics or what have you, the fact is computer science is a really great career or field to be in, to have work-life balance. A lot of people in computer science work remotely, but another thing that computer science has opened up for me is a lot of financial stability. So I can afford to do a lot of things that I just couldn't do when I was working in retail. And I'm really thankful for, and I wish that every career had this access, but unfortunately, there's only so many careers right now that have financial access, and computer science is a huge one. So I can afford to pay for like lighting equipment and makeup and costumes and all of those things to be able to do cosplay. And because of the work-life balance working for Google, like I'm able to get off of work and explore all of the things that I love. And so if you feel strongly about like athletics or feel strongly about the arts, but you also want to be in computer science, like this is not something that's going to stop you from pursuing other dreams and other goals. Like your managers or the people around you will support you in any other extracurricular interests that you have.
That was an awesome answer. So I think that's all of the questions that we have. Any parting words before we close out?
Yes, I do have parting words. I just want to say that for all of the kids or teens who currently may live in like poverty or in areas that have less access to these sorts of programs, I just want you to know that there are programs, after school programs that are accessible for kids. Like how I grew up, a lot of like cities have parks and recreation departments, and they have vouchers which allow people to have access to government funded or public funded events and public funded activities. And so if you are a teen and if you're a parent listening, definitely research these sorts of things, because after school programs is what changed my life, I feel, and what made me be able to get to the places that I'm at today, because I was interacting with so many different types of people, and I was able to learn about so many different types of things that I would have never had access to. So I also want to say that like your dreams, like the things that you believe in and the things that you want to do are just in arm's reach. There are so many people in your community who will reach out to you and help you. And if they're not reaching out to you, you can reach out to people in your community and ask for that help. It is 100% possible. I know I'm always up for helping anyone. And so please like go after your dreams. Your community wants you to pursue them, and your community wants to help you. And that's all I have for today.
Awesome. Well,
Thank you so much, Ninti. Those parting words were amazing parting words. I think people forget, that, how do I say this? There are a lot of people who think certain things are only accessible if you are wealthy or, live in certain neighborhoods. But no matter where you are, there is access to something, right? And the beauty of growing up in this technology age is it could be something virtual that you can even do on your phone, like depending on how the program is set up. And so thank you for the parting words to never give up with your dreams, but also look in what is available in your community. And one of my favorite proverbs, it takes a village to raise a child. So that community and village will definitely support your dreams, even if your family can't do it. Because my parents did not like in math and science, but they raised an engineer, right? And so look to that community to support you. So in parting words, I want to make sure that everyone remembers to fill out the survey. Carlin put it in the link. And Carlin, really quick before we go, can you make a quick announcement what is coming up next?
yes.
We want to thank you so much, Ninti, for taking time. This is so great. We were like, we don't care if she goes over. She has to finish the girl. She has to finish the girl. We have to see the Afro puff. Like, we were like, it is Black History Month. We're having a Black woman engineer. She is drawing a Black girl with a Afro puff. She will finish. We got to see it. So thank you so much, because we love the image. A lot of our audience are Black girls, and we want them, to see themselves. And I'm like, oh, they see themselves in Ninti, and they see themselves in that drawing, right? Go ahead, Carlin, before we close.
Yes, so our last program of February is going to be this Saturday, our STEM in the City workshop. We have Dr. Venice Jennings, who is going to be talking to us about urban green spaces. So I am dropping the registration link in the chat, and we definitely encourage you to join us this Saturday from 1 to 2 p.m. to learn about urban green spaces.
And thank you so much for joining us for the Teen Science Cafe. Good night, stay safe, social distance, wash your hands, wear your mask. Have a great rest of your evening. And thank you for joining us, whether you're live or catching us on the YouTube channel after the cafe.